accountability and learning, the meal, I guess, protocol. I'm interested in learning more about it from Impact Plus. But we have Eduard, Peris, and Raquel. Raquel, your last name, I don't want to make sure that I get it wrong. Oh, Suárez. Thank you, David. Yeah, so happy to introduce Eduard Peris and Raquel Suárez from Impact Plus. Really interested to hear about some of the work they're doing around meal and integrating that, monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning methodologies with blockchain technology. Particularly relevant, Alfonso, yes, to kind of potentially the standards work. Also, how they're doing in getting adoption. That's always been a big question for us. But with that, I'll hand over the floor, I guess, to Eduard. Are you going to kick it off? Are you real quick, Raquel?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Sherwood. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with you guys. We've talked with you and your team a bit in the past. Thanks, Esther, also for making the connection here and giving us this opportunity to bridge with other players in this space, right? So just some background. I'm going to let Raquel introduce herself in a bit, and I'll first start with my introduction, give Raquel a chance to introduce herself, give you 2 minutes on Impact Plus, won't bore you with that, and then we'll just jump right into it. So super quick. I'm Ed. I'm originally from Barcelona. I'm also half French. I have a small 3-year-old. That's one of the reasons I'm back in Barcelona after having spent 15 plus years working in international development projects from Afghanistan to Niger, El Salvador, etc. And it's an industry that I like very much, but that I approach very humbly because I think international development, the space can do a lot of good, but also has lots of troubles of doing good properly. Yes. And over the past years, as I worked in this space and realized the good and the improvement that we can do, I started a Tech for Good NGO out of Niger, where we just looked at how different tech could support USAID, UKAID, and other international actors, international development actors in this space, right? May it be geomapping, applying basic AI projects. Yeah, believe it or not, we started that a couple of years ago, etc. And I bumped into blockchain, and that was impressive. I drank the Kool-Aid, like all of us. I realized that the inherent characteristics of blockchain, no need to give you a whole explanation here, have the capacity to improve programming in the international development space in a way that other technologies cannot. Other technologies have other advantages. I also think, mental note, we don't need to see things in silos, right? Different technologies need to work together. AI, blockchain, geomapping can all work together to develop monitoring and evaluation tools, right? But in this case, I realized that blockchain had something that was absolutely incredible when it came to designing programming, from thanks to transparency, speed, accuracy, you name it. And thanks to Polygon, we started working and developed Impact Plus. And the objective of Impact Plus is to bridge the international development space and the Web3 space. One of the things I've learned by being in the space, and then I'll pass it on to Raquel in a second, is that both worlds rarely speak to each other. And I'll go into that a bit more after Raquel introduces herself. But that's the main objective, right? What's happening here? Why aren't these two worlds speaking sufficiently to each other? And we realize the monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning has to do with this. And I'll pause there and let Raquel introduce herself.
Thank you, Ed. I'm Raquel Suárez Dominguez. I'm the Senior Meal Advisor for Impact Plus for almost 18 months now. As Eduard, I have an international background, working for humanitarian response and also international development I was 10 years on the field in different African countries and also in Haiti after the earthquake. So after Ed, I found blockchain an amazing thing to improve action in humanitarian response and international development. And I'm a meal advisor and senior meal advisor. So we are trying to bring all these methodologies and all these approach from international development space to Web3 and blockchain spaces. So I will let Ed continue with the presentation, and we will get deep into it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Raquel. We're incredibly lucky to have Raquel. Raquel has 18 years plus working in very complicated zones, specializing in monitoring and evaluation. So as we got together, we realized that current monitoring and evaluation accountability and learning tools from the international development space were not fully adapted to blockchain, right? What we saw basically is that while in the USAID, UKAID, SDG space, there were some forward thinkers who understood blockchain. The majority still don't get it. Yeah, they still associate our industry with scams. They associate it with complex technology, complicated regulation, etc. on the one hand. And on the other hand, we also realized that many of the startups who have tremendous technical capabilities, much more than anything I will ever have, sometimes don't have that field experience or don't understand the language that these organizations here speak. And they're two different worlds. So our objective, as I was saying, was trying to bridge this. Because to take it down, what we see is that when you're a startup trying to become sustainable, and again, sustainability is not only about funding, it's about having a program that is ethical, that is applicable in the field, and that users will make theirs. But you also need funding, right? So when we're talking about a program being sustainable, of course, you also have that funding component. And you cannot go and try and get funding to USAID as if you were speaking to a layer 1 or a layer 2. The language is very different. What they're asking for is very different. But USAID is going to be asking you for a monitoring evaluation plan, for a sustainability plan, for a gender plan, for a bottom-up approach. If you talk to a private foundation, they're going to be asking you for an SCG report or ESG report, right? If you're talking to a VC, they're going to be asking you for a double bottom line, etc. So you need to know how to speak to those organizations, but mostly you need to be able to prove what is your impact. And in many cases, when Raquel and I go to startups and we ask them, what is your impact? There's a pause. Yeah, and there's generally a quick answer, which is, oh, it's my impact. It's measured because it's on chain, or it's X amount of rubbish that's been cleared from the sea, or whatever or we've supported X amount of people, etc. But there seems to be a lack of rigorosity when you implement monitoring and evaluation tools. We prefer the longer term monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning tool because MEL goes much further than just measuring what are your outputs and your incomes. And Raquel will give us a bit more of an overview there. So as we move forward, what would be great is as we're talking, if you'd like to ask questions, feel free to perhaps drop them in the chat box. Or tell us a bit about your background so we understand your profile, so we can also adapt what we're talking about in case we take things for granted that you already know, or if you want us to adapt what we're speaking, please feel free to add your comments there. In any case, what we're going to discuss today are the strategies for effective impact measurement for blockchain projects. As mentioned, Impact Plus is a team of individuals who who have an international background expertise and drank the blockchain Kool-Aid. So we kind of bridge both worlds. And our mission is really to ensure that communities reclaim their agency through Web3. We think one of the beauties of Web3 is that international development programs will be led by communities that receive beneficiaries, communities that receive those that support in the future, right? That it becomes a top-down approach as much as it is it becomes a bottom-up approach. I hate that term anyway. Then it is currently a top-down approach today, right? So one of the things we're launching is the Responsible Revolution, and that's an industry-wide initiative where all these tools that we're putting together that include monitoring and evaluation will be lump sum together, and we'll be able to work with startups and a number of others organizations to make sure that we have those tools so that startups can become sustainable. Real quick, when we started talking about monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, we were very lucky quickly to get a grant from UKAID. And Raquel and the team and myself spent a bit of time working with a number of startups to understand what were the issues that they had when they were trying to measure their progress. What were the tools they were using? Did they think they were being sufficiently professional with this? Were they spending enough time measuring their results, etc.? And through this work, we developed a comprehensive methodology, which is what we're going to discuss today. So we're incredibly grateful to UK and Frontier Tech, which is kind of the spark of this project that got initiated us into this thinking and helped us put together this methodology that we have today. And why are we doing this? For a number of reasons. We think that in order for blockchain projects to grow, we need to scale and we need to build trust with donors, VCs, and the communities by showing credible results. It's exactly what's on that slide, right? So we need frameworks that work, frameworks that are trusted, that work, that can build that trust with these donors and speak the language of these donors. I always like to say that Bill Gates does not pay me to use Excel. I think there'll come a day where layer ones and layer twos will no longer finance blockchain startup impact projects, and this funding will have to come from this space, from the international and humanitarian space. So it's good that we understand how they think, and that we can speak to them in a way that is appealing in order to create those bridges and create that trust with them. So we've been seeing that impact is all over the place. It's growing tremendously. No need to go into this. So without further ado, what do we think are the problems that we are facing or that impact startups are facing when they try to prove their impact? And this might not be the case with all of you. Huh? Again, super humble here. This is just some thoughts that we have gathered over the past few months and for a couple of years even, and we've come up with amazing organizations who are also thinking about these things. But in general, and if we can generalize, we have seen that traditional methodologies that are used by USAID, UKAID, and other large players and all their implementing partners like Mercy Corps, Demonic, Creative, DAI, you name them, right? The famous organizations that are sub or get funding from the USAID, they have very strong monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning methodologies, but they are simply not adapted to blockchain. They are not adapted to the inherent characteristics that make blockchain a specific, useful tool that increases the effectiveness of their programs. So you can't really measure that added value of blockchain, like what is the trust that's being created, the immutability component, transparency, the tokenomics that you use. That's new for them, right? We need to understand what is the value add that these characteristics bring to the table. Why is a blockchain solution more effective than another solution that does not use blockchain? At the end of the day, whenever we speak with a startup, the first question we ask them is, why do you need blockchain, right? And you need to be able to quantify that and explain that clearly, because in many cases you do not need blockchain. So we see that impact methodologies are sometimes not adapted to tell you why you need blockchain or what is that specific value add. So it helps you work through that. And that's the same thing as this second point, which I've already gone into, right? It's hard to quantify that value add of blockchain compared to traditional programming that has existed for many, many years. If you use blockchain for remittances in a refugee camp, yes, for us, we see the value add, but how do you transmit it to the guy that runs the refugee camp, right? So you need those tools that allow you to measure that. And the other point, and very important point, is that startups are so busy because they have a short runway, working on the tech, a number of other issues, that they are not familiar with measurement methodologies. So the idea is that we need to understand why these results are not quantifiable. And why is this important? For a number of reasons. Everybody thinks of funding, and it's one of the major issues startups still have. So that we do acknowledge that monitoring tools can be very useful to convince donors and other investors to work with blockchain organizations. It's also very hard to scale if you don't know exactly what you're solving and specifically what is the value add of your solution, right? Then, and this is a very, very important component, sometimes without even realize it, we create risks. Yeah, we create circumstances in the field that we hadn't thought of just because we're working on our tech, we're working away from a certain solution, and just because sometimes there's so many layers to the onion that we don't quite understand how a certain community operates. Super easy example, doesn't mean it's always the case, but it's we've seen things along the lines of, hey, I have a wonderful UBI solution, universal basic income solution, that we have that we could use through blockchain. And we have thought that we could give $100 to 100 youth in a community in X country, wherever. Now, this on paper seems wonderful, right? You're helping a community by giving them economic support. But hey, wait a minute. What happens if you give money to 100 youth, but you're not channeling that funding through the elders of that community who had certain power structures in place, right? That community had certain power structures in place. You have come in with a very good idea, but you are creating changes in that power structure, which is not something you had previously intended. They might be positive, they might not, but you are creating them. So what are the consequences of those changes? Have you thought about those potential changes? How will you be able to overcome them, etc.? Yeah. So what are the ethical effects that you might have there? And then finally, if we are able to show what our impact is in a professional way that is recognized with donors, we will be able to support our sector because it is unfortunately still associated with scams and real quick investments and all that stuff, right? So the idea is that it can professionalize our space. So I'll leave this one to Raquel. And the idea now is that we go a bit deeper. I don't know if there are any questions. If not, feel free to type them in. Happy to do this in a participatory manner. But the idea is that we do take a deeper dive, and Raquel and I will have a bit of a conversation as we discuss what monitoring, evaluation, accountability learning is, how it impacts blockchain projects, etc. Raquel, please go ahead. So what is MEL?
Yes. We have questions. I don't know if we are taking now or we wait till the end.
We have them already?
Yes, Sherwood.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
Two questions. One, we see a lot of initiatives where organizations are trying to find, and we have a standards working group, like we're trying to develop frameworks, kind of larger frameworks, and drive use across different industries. One step that's kind of missing a lot of times is trying to kind of work across the different initiatives, kind of this building a network of networks. I've seen some good examples, like the Pathfinder framework, for example, is trying to build on a network of networks. And so I'm just kind of curious, with Meal, is this something that you're trying to work across different initiatives or find ways for kind of cross collaboration to kind of bring people together? Because obviously a standard is only as good as the network that's using it, right?
Right. So, Raquel, I'll give a quick overview on the responsible revolution, and then perhaps you can do a deeper dive into the care center that we're building for startups, right? So, two levels of thinking. The first one is we're putting together this industry-wide initiative called the Responsible Revolution, and the idea is that the main actors of this space work together for a couple of years with the UKAs, USAID, etc., and a number of startups to evaluate these methodologies, work on them, and with I like working teams, but I think it's important that we separate working teams where you can only give a few hours of work every week with people who are fully dedicated solving a problem. The idea is that under the Responsible Revolution led by Raquel, we will be putting in place a team of 2 or 3 monitoring and evaluation experts who will be working on these methodologies and refining these concepts, because we've already spent a year on them, and adapting them to the different projects and chains that are interested in using them. You will also see, as we discussed, as we go through our methodology, that it doesn't focus as much on the technology than on the needs and the realities that it is solving in the field. So it really, Raquel, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But this is how we thought about things. We see the technology as a tool that solves a specific need. So what we did is we took the approaches of international development organizations, from UNDP to USAID, etc., and refine them so that you can incorporate the value add that are created by using blockchain. So in principle, the kind of questions and the way we operate is open for any kind of chain independently of its technology, because of that focus on what is the impact that we are having in the end user, on the one hand. And on the other hand, we are giving very detailed support to specific organizations under the care center, right? Raquel, if you want to give perhaps a couple examples of the work that we're doing there, pick a couple organizations that are very different to each other, to give Sherwood an idea of the support we give.
Yeah. So when we talk about the meal, is monitoring how we are regularly collecting data, using it, and how we are getting this information to improve our activities and be able to show our outcomes. But also evaluation, that is taking a photograph in different times of our project to see if everything is going as we want. Also accountability, that is how we are use our power, because we have power in front of a target, a vulnerable population, and then learning how we are using that to get better. So what we use all this approach, because when you have a donor, a governmental donor for international cooperation, and you need to have a need assessment and understand all the needs of the target population that you want to address, and then a baseline, so you are able to monitor what you are doing during the time, and then you have a set of activities that they respond to a log frame or of theory of change, and you have your indicators and all of that. So we're trying to how you say, mentoring a little bit the startups to follow up this approach. We need to say, like, we are focused on social and environmental startups, and not all of them, because there is some startups that we cannot help them with this approach, because we are very focused on social and environmental impact. And there, so we developed two frameworks. These frameworks they're standardized. We try to standardize because it's very complicated, because the social problem, they must to be very specific. So sometimes the same social problem in one country, you cannot scale easily, because the people are different, the context is different. So what we are trying to help the startups is to understand how to approach these social needs, and how you can afford them, and how you can help them, and how you can measure the impact of your activities, because we have positive impact that we expect, but sometimes we have unintended consequences, because the startups, they're very focused on technology, and they sometimes we are seeing that they leave a population behind. Like, okay, we trust a local NGO that they are doing that, but when you ask them how the beneficiaries were selected, it was in a fair manner. Why was the selection criteria? Are you what are the consequences for the local market? They don't know. They don't know how to answer you. They don't have the information, because they're very focused on technology and do the solution and have everything right in code, but they don't know how to approach people and social problems. So that is why we want to help them to improve that. So we have the Polygon Impact Care Center. We have almost 20 startups there, and we are using this approach. One tool, we have two tools to provide technical support to these startups. One tool is blockchain value add. From our research that I share in the chat, from this research, we identified several dimensions where blockchain is adding value: in trust, transparency, reduced cost, interoperability, tokenization. There are things that are specific for blockchain, and they are also improving and enhance a lot of impact in the social space. But so we create this tool linked to the social impact. So there we have the dimension. We create a set of guiding questions. So we spend like 2 hours, 3 hours with the startup, interviewing them and getting all the information. And then we put the information in our tool with a score. And then we have a final result in a graphic view, where you see where your startup are and where they must be. Because we using this tool, we have okay, if you want if your most important value add is trust, you need to have all these aspects. They must to be in the top of your solution. So that is one thing what we are doing. And then we have another tool that is the impact framework, and there is more focus on the startups that are working in social impact and also environmental impact, and that is to to help them to understand, to develop a theory of change, metrics, indicators, and how they are approaching the problem, how they are measuring, how they are avoiding unintended consequences. And we also provide them with technical support and tools to improve their startup. For example, if we have a project of financial inclusion, it's not just measuring whether the target population have received the money, because sometimes the startups, they are focused on that. Okay, they have the money, I have the transaction, I have everything is public, okay, everything is good. But no, because you don't know the impact on the local markets, for example. Do the traders are also benefiting for this support? Are also they are able to cope with increased demand for the products in the local market? Or and what about the people that are not receive anything? Maybe they are also suffering because there is a negative impact, because you are providing cash transfer in the village, and now the prices for food or basic necessities are increasing because there is more demand. So it's very important to understand all the components when you are working with people, and more when you are in vulnerable context, because you don't know. Sometimes technology allow us to reach the people we want to reach, but we need also to make sure that the people who are not directly targeted are not being affected either. So that is why we want we are working with the startups to help them to improve that. And it's an amazing work, because when we are working with these guiding questions, they realize, like, okay, we never think about that, or we are not considering this, and we never thought about the privacy of the target population, or security issues that we need to take into account in our initiative. So that is a little bit overview about the tools, our methodology.
Yeah, I think Raquel, since I don't know if you wanted to jump in again, Sherwood.
I did, yeah. Just something that comes to mind. Can you speak specifically to why in your solution blockchain is like how you're quantifying the value out of blockchain? It's something that why you couldn't do this with a centralized database.
You could do it with a centralized database. Our solution, what we've been working on, is not blockchain based.
Right.
It doesn't have a token. It doesn't actually need blockchain to work. Our solution is a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods in order to track that impact.
Okay.
Perhaps what we could do, Raquel, because there's a question from Alfonso that's very important, is the difference between MEL and other MRV methodologies. And I think, Alfonso, that the way to answer this question is perhaps explaining what the different parts of MEL, right? And then we can see the difference with MRV. I think that will allow us to see the difference. But I think Raquel has already hinted how it goes beyond MRV. You will see that it's kind of a larger umbrella that focuses more on the social impact that you have on the people than on the specific solution that you might have, on the specific outputs that you might have, excuse me. Right, Raquel?
Yeah, sure. I think meal is more comprehensive. There is a more holistic approach, because you are considering all the time the target population feedback. For example, in accountability, you implement complaint mechanisms. You have a shared information plan to share information all the time with the community. You are collecting feedback. You are collecting complaints. You are also increased participation, because they need to be part of our decision making process in all stage, not just when you implement your activity, but also in the design, also when you are doing an evaluation. So it's more, for me, it's more social, more increase the community involvement, increase quality too, because people have the right to decide, right? You cannot go to somewhere and say, okay, I'm going to do that in your village. People need to decide if that is the best solution for them, how they want to be involved, how they want to communicate with you, and all of that. Sometimes we are missing that when we create a solution. We want just to see a problem in internet. We say, okay, we need to go there, but then we are not involving communities and target population in all process, all this. So for me, meal is more holistic, more more important than MRV. MRV sometimes is just in indicators, quantitative data, try to track in the information, but you are not collecting this qualitative data that is very important.
Sure, Alfonso, I wish we could say, hey, our solution is on blockchain. I truly wish we could say that. But we realized, and we went through this, you can't imagine how many conversations we've had on this, right? We think that the human component to measure impact is so important under this approach, the qualitative aspect of it, that we didn't find a way of having it performed automatically by an algorithm. It doesn't mean, however, that as much as we can using these quantitative and qualitative methods, that we have been able to come up with a tool where we take a number of characteristics of blockchain and that we can measure, we can assign it a value, and then come up with a number and a spider chart, etc., to understand where that project is going, what are its strong points, its weaker points, and necessary improvements, etc. But not as a tokenized or just a blockchain solution in itself, right? So what we did is we could.
Well, just when I was asking that question, because we thought a lot about this, and so like something like blockchain, provides value. I was just trying to understand where blockchain could provide value for meal. And so, for one example, when you have something like this, we were dealing with so many different projects across the world. Obviously, verification is a really kind of hard piece. Some of the solutions that we built and looked at. The reason that the DLT is so valuable or can provide value in situations like this is because it can provide kind of access to a layer of information that allows you to kind of scale and decentralize the verification component of it. If you allow a lot of different people in a particular region, for example, to be aware of and understand that they can be compensated somehow or receive some value for verifying something about a project, that can provide a lot of value. And obviously, like a decentralized approach provides a little bit better of a tool for use cases like that. So that's kind of what that's my motivation behind the question, was really trying to kind of pull out and tease out the areas where DLT could provide potential value for meal.
We absolutely agree that DLT can provide value to monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, without a doubt, right? We think it's part of a comprehensive approach where at the end of the day, you still need to go outside of a technical solution by understanding certain aspects that are hard to quantify. And when you talk with the people in the field. So absolutely, there are specific components, particularly in the environmental projects, where DLT can add value, without a doubt. That's not what we're trying to say at all.
Yeah, and so just following up on Alfonso's point, we're in general, we ask these questions because we've been through the blockchain is good for everything gauntlet, and we really try to kind of pull out and ask questions and really tease out to understand if it's useful and where it's useful, because it isn't useful for everything,
Yeah, this is the first question we always ask a startup is, why do you need blockchain? And if the answer takes more than 3 or 4 sentences, most of the times you don't really need blockchain, right? There's not a good definition here. But I think it's important to acknowledge a conceptual difference here, where our task is to understand the impact that social and environmental projects that use blockchain have on people. At the end of the day, it's everything we do has an objective. Raquel, I'm speaking under your authority. You're the male expert. I was more of a generalist in the field, right? But at the end of the day, all the international development we have work has an objective, which is to improve people's lives one way or another. If you're not achieving that, the rest doesn't really matter. When you look at it from this perspective, blockchain can be a tool to achieve this. We're not looking at it that the change that the blockchain itself is the change. We're working with many startups who are solving problems that have been solved, or we've been trying to solve them for the past 60 or 70 years. Yeah. For example, more efficient agricultural systems for farmers, payment platforms for farmers, or access to insurance through smart contracts. Boom, you can have a farmer that is paid automatically when the insurance is linked to an oracle. This is the kind of project where this methodology can analyze to what extent that blockchain solution is more effective than a solution that doesn't use blockchain. Yeah, when you're doing an insurance system and there's no blockchain, the farmer doesn't actually know what they signed. They might tell them, hey, the insurance company might be a scam. Who knows? But by putting in blockchain, you have an automatic payment linked to an oracle, and that farmer should be paid, or so it seems. But perhaps the farmer doesn't even know what his seed phrase is, and we're causing more harm than good because he loses the money. So we need methodologies that help us track to what extent these solutions that are theoretically solving real life use cases and improving people's lives are achieved thanks to blockchain, or are more complicated because of blockchain. So it's not solutions that depend 100% on blockchain. What we're seeing is that many of them use blockchain to increase the efficiency of solutions that have been put in place over the past hundred of years, right? I see where you're going with the show, but that's a bit the difference where we're going with this. Does
Yes,
that answer the question?
Yes.
yes, and also just to add something to that, that is what we have seen is there is a lot of quantitative data. They just focus on numbers and try to get the transaction, the things that are very quantitative, but we don't have qualitative data. And that is what we want to change a little bit for the startups, like try to collect more qualitative data, feedback, other evaluation, other things from the final target population, to also get that on your initiative, not just to focus on numbers and number of transactions and okay, we spend the money, that's all, check. No, it's not like that. What is how the people feel about that? What is the impact on the field? Because if not, we are missing a lot of information that is crucial, not just for you your measure your startup or your activities, but also because you want to change people's lives. So we need to track more information about that. Yeah.
But I would love to keep this conversation going after this 1 hour, because the more we talk, the clearer it is to me the synergies that our groups could have here, right? Because we come from different approaches, and we all want to solve the same problem, and we're approaching it from different angles. And I do see tremendous value by the questions you're asking and the way you're approaching it compared to how we think about it. That makes sense to carry on this conversation and potentially even work on these solutions together. Perhaps Raquel, if you could, we could do a bit of a deeper dive to answer. And I mean, it's great. Alfonso showed you actually guiding us through the presentation, and you're hitting on the key questions we want to solve, right? How we're turning this qualitative data into how do we process it? Perhaps we can do a bit of a deeper dive by taking 2-3 examples of how we took very large pools of problem sets and broke them down into a few specific questions, and then took them down to specific numbers into a spiderweb solution, right? Maybe we can take a couple examples there, Raquel, of the tools we used.
Yeah. Yeah, so for qualitative data, it depends on the type of information that you are collecting. If it's feedback, if other kind of information, it depends on the type of the data you are collecting. So we are using different, we are proposing different solutions for that. You have different now with the artificial intelligence, you have a very easy way to do it, but there is other methodologies like another app like Enviva or another, or the cloud. So there is different ways to analyze qualitative data, and there you can also get your conclusion for that, and it's not complicated. We are using that using open questions in our surveys, and we recommend also to get feedback from participants. So I don't know if you have more question there, we missed or we
Why don't you
couldn't.
why don't we take so in the blockchain impact framework, right? We can in this slide, why don't we take one of these key questions like the social problem analysis and walk our friends through the different kinds of questions we do. Here we have the first layer. We could take whichever you think makes the most sense and have a bit of a discussion, right? So when we do the blockchain impact framework, we're looking at three big blocks of information to understand the core dimensions of the project. So the monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning component, to what extent this project is sustainable, and what is the core use of the technology of that project. And that triangle gives you an overall idea of where that project is going. And these are just the subtitles and all that we analyze, as you can see in the middle of this slide, which carries the mail, sustainability, and technology. And when we click on each one of them, we take theory of change and outcome assessment, we take the needs assessment, it pops out to another menu where we have a series of questions, and we work with the startup to understand to what extent they have a theory of change, how they thought about the impact that the project has on their community, the legal and ethical considerations of that project regarding data protection or protection from harm, or what grievance redressal mechanisms do they have in place when the project is actually put in place, and oh my God, we messed up, what do we do now? Well, we have a backup plan in case we thought of that black swan or not. What is our sustainability plan that doesn't only have to do with funding, but it has to do with the environmental impact that you have, the extent to which the community is trained and supported to use that technology over the long run, etc. Right? So this is how we go from an abstract idea, and slowly, by going through all these questions, we end up to a situation where we can quantify that by giving a grade at the end of the day. Raquel, do you want to take one or two that seem particularly interesting? Or if you guys want to pick one, we could also do it that way. But by looking at this, it gives you an idea of the level of detail of the framework and the kind of questions that we ask to get that comprehensive assessment of the impact that a project that uses blockchain to overcome a specific problem uses, right, achieves.
Yeah, for example, as Ed say, we have a theory of change and outcome assessment, right, for social problem analysis dimension. So we ask there to the initiative, for example, if they have defined a clear problem statement and they are addressing a specific social problem. And depending on their answer that we collected, then we analyze their documentation and depending also in their answer, and we provide them a score from not meet, partially meet, mostly meet, fully meet, or non-applicable, because sometimes they have some aspects of the tool that they are not applicable. So using this way, at the end, we have a final score, because for each dimension, we have a different sections inside. For example, for B value add, the value add of blockchain, we have trust and transparency. For inside of trust and transparency, we have evidence, trust, record keeping, target population acknowledgement, dispute resolution, behavioral change, communication, etc., etc. For each of these dimensions, we have what we are looking for. For example, for evidence, so we want to understand which kind of specific instance and evidence where blockchain is enhanced transparency and in this area, right? So we ask them for a specific examples where transparency or trust will be needed, and the database that they show that. So depending on the response and also the information that they share with us, we provide them a score from not meet to fully meet, and they provide us a score, and then we see where at the end we have a graphic that show us where is the startup for all these dimensions and where they have to be. Because if they have to meet evidence, trans, and all these sub-dimensions in this big dimension that is trust and transparency, they have to fill all the aspects. And if not, we must work on that. So in the Polygon Impact Center, we use this tool as an assessment to identify the areas of improvement, the opportunities, how we can help them. So when we have all these tools already with all the information that we are looking for. And then we develop a recommendation and action plan with the startup, and we start to work with them to reinforce all of that. So now blockchain for them is increasing trust and transparency, and they can use that for their narrative to sell better their ideas, because we are seeing and assessing in all the dimensions that their initiative has improving, and they are showing more impact.
Guys, before we go on, I want to thank you. This is, and I'm sure Raquel will agree, this is probably one of the most interesting webinars we've done, with the level of feedback and discussion, and the quality of this group is extraordinary. So thank you for this. We're having a wonderful time.
Thank you for
And
that.
we really appreciate these questions and the way I would think you're making us think as we go forward. It's really, really cool. Having said that, I think Alfonso has another question, where he's saying scores an interesting approach. Is the grading policy public and transparent? Well, that honestly, it will depend. It depends what each startup wants to do, right? We're not here to impose our systems to anyone, or to point fingers or whatever. We're here to help the startups. If they want to make it public, they're more than welcome to. But we think that in the long run, it would be ideal if we could come up with a system where we would have external, and we'd love your support here, right, to take it a step further. But where we're taking this is, let's develop this methodology. Let's come up with a series of people that are trained to provide these evaluations, the support, etc. Because we need to standardize. The problem with grading is that you need people that standardize the grading. If not, it doesn't mean anything, right? Different people can grade very differently. So for the grading to work, it has to be a certain set of people who can grade this in a very similar manner, if you want to then publish this and use it, right? We can also give it to startups, and they can self-grade, use it themselves, etc. But of course, as you say, Alfonso, it's about the governance of grading. We need to give it some more thought of what is the best way to move this forward, so that if it is published, it is equitable, and it means the same thing no matter who uses it. And that's tricky, as always. Yeah. It's like when I passed my driver's license, who gets to say whether I'm good enough to drive or not? Well, theoretically, you've got these people that passed a test and a certain amount of training, and were qualified to give out those grades. So grading is always incredibly tricky.
I do have one question, just your privilege. I did put a link out there about an ebook that we put on around why blockchain technology specifically improved environmental, social impacts, logistics, all kinds of things. One thing I was going to ask you around the grading is, one of the things we ran into with measurement was, I'll give a good example. The government of Rwanda, the mining board, implemented blockchain technology so that they could prove through tokenization that tantalum, which is in cell phones and very key rare earth, I think it's rare earth, wasn't produced using child labor, and it was under OECD conditions. And so this is something that's running now on blockchain, and they can now certify that tantalum was not produced under those conditions. But we couldn't measure out of them was we couldn't go back and say, how much child labor were you using in the past? This has improved. They're not going to admit that. And so we've run into that in a couple of areas where we couldn't go to them and say you were polluting, or how is this reduced polluting on a measurement scale. Same with, let's say, like child labor. You can't go to the Rwanda mining board and say how much child labor was being used in the past. We know it's maybe reduced by 90-some%, but they're not going to admit how much was used in the past, because now they got something to improve it. How do you go back and measure that? Is it something that you don't measure then and just say, this is how it's being done today? You don't compare it to past performance at all? That question makes sense at all?
Yeah, it does. It does. There's different things you can do, right? So independently of the pre-project, what is generally done in an international development project, as I'm sure you guys know, is you need a baseline. Yeah, you need a pre-report, then a halfway, a midway, and then a final report to see that evolution, right? And one of the things you can track there is how that changes over time in that project, of course. Okay. However, if you're looking before that, there's various things you can do. The first thing that you can potentially do is look for similar projects under similar circumstances, which is not always easy. You can look at different areas of that country. You can look at different countries with similar circumstances and look at the figures there to compare. But again, this is always very hard to do. or you can also look at secondary data. But it's incredibly hard to measure with precision unless there have been scientific studies of that beforehand. And
Or establishing a control group. You provide
yeah,
assistance to one group, and in the same area, you don't provide to another group, and you measure both
what I
of
meant.
them. But that is a very ethical restraint there. It's tricky to do that because you are asking people to provide you information, and you are not giving anything in return. And that has been very tricky on the field. But I have been working in several projects where we have a control group. We have another group where we are providing, for example, cash transfer during an emergency. And we were measuring both groups at the same time to see the impact in both groups, because the other group that they didn't receive anything, they also have an impact on that. Yeah.
But you have to do this very, very well because obviously correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Causation. So sometimes there are external factors that create those changes that are unrelated to your project. So you have to do this very, very seriously and very, very well, and you have to be able to take those hypotheses and work on them properly because you just never know sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You need to have people. They know very well the methodologies for social impact and methodologies. Yeah. Hmm.
Eduard, I shared a link. I highly recommend you join one of our standards working group calls that Alfonso shared. I wanted to ask a question. I know we're kind of starting to run up on time, but this is a really kind of near and dear to my heart. It's about the verification, and I was wondering if you could provide a specific example of, for example, how you go about proving the money dispersed to an organization goes to do what it says it's going to do. Just a very easy kind of use case, kind of what's the value add that you bring to that particular process with Meal and the work that you're doing.
Take this one, Raquel, or should I?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I think there's only one way of doing that. You need to. So there's two. Sorry, let me take a step back. The tools we have developed right now, these are tools that help an organization assess where it stands and what it should be doing. Right? It's an overview. Now, in order to do the monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning yourself and go into the weeds, I truly think that the only way to do that is going out there. Yeah, it's going out there, speaking with, is doing first your backup research, talk to the donors, talk to everyone that's involved, etc. But at the core, it's the people on whom with whom you're working. Yeah, the people whose lives you're trying to improve, the communities you're supporting. And the only way to do that is to go out there, work with them, and interview them and spend time with them. And there are methodologies to do that by developing the baseline, the mid report, and the final report so that you can actually measure that. And those methodologies have, by our understanding, don't have much to do with blockchain. Sorry, they don't have much to do with blockchain, right? The traditional MEL methodologies that we have been implementing in our pre-blockchain world, that seems so many years back now, right? When we were working in the case of Raquel in DRC and Haiti, in my case in Niger, we actually met in Niger. And where we had a specific team that only did monitoring and evaluation. Believe it or not, I might get the percentage right, it changes, but a USAID project that's maybe $5 million has a 3 to 7% of its budget that only goes to monitoring and evaluation to set up a full team that does that. And these methodologies exist, right? So the beauty is that when we start doing this, we should be able to do that M&E, monitoring evaluation, combined with this idea that blockchain adds value and bringing in these new tools that we're developing now.
Got it. Yep.
And this goes back, Sherwood, to that original question, right? Why is it so hard to measure those results on chain? Because there's that human component, that qualitative component. You need to talk to people at the end of the day. That's the conclusion we reached. If you want to have that comprehensive picture, we do think blockchain makes life very precise, and much easier for us. But there's something about talking to people, that human factor, that you always need to keep into consideration, I would say.
Very good. Well, we're running up on time here. I want to be cognizant of that. This is a really delightful, really interesting presentation. So I want to thank you very much, Eduard and Raquel, for sharing your subject matter expertise and giving us some things to think about. I'd love for you both to join the standards working group call that Alfonso mentioned. I've shared a link for it. Yeah, we'd love to continue the conversation. Please let us know how things are going, and happy I'd always kind of have the group collaborate and brainstorm about ideas. Our mailing list is a great way to do that, just kind of posting questions of interest. The community will usually jump on that, and everybody has a lot of really interesting opinions and resources. Yeah, just want to thank you so much both for coming and sharing today. I think we all really enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure. As I said before, you got us thinking, right? And this is when it becomes fun and entertaining. And yeah, let's keep talking, because we're launching this responsible revolution. We'd love to have you guys on board. We're talking to the main players on this, and it seems like a no-brainer. You guys really get it, right? So we hope to join your working groups, and we'd love to have you also on board with the responsible revolution. Let's keep talking. And thanks so much. Also, thank you, Raquel, for your expertise. You've been instrumental in making this happen. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure all around.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.